thank you everyone who has joined us today on your Friday evening. We hope we will make your Friday into what we call these days Friday. Space has been a topic of fascination for many of us, and personally for me, I remember when I was a child and used to sleep on the terrace in summers and look at the stars and constellations, and used to fascinate me. Why do you join those dots? Who lives there? What would happen in a rocket? Whatever, all these things. And the sci-fi movies just increase the level of fascination. And today I'm very excited because the stories of all our four panelists, they are so exciting of how they have come closer to the mysteries of science and space science, and also how they are sharing it with everyone else around them, the society and the community. So without much ado, I'll just introduce them quickly. Alphabetically, we have Dr. Bidushi Bhattacharya. Dr. Bidushi is a rocket scientist who has been working in the space industry for 3 decades, including working with NASA on projects like the popular Hubble Space Telescope. She's the founder and CEO of Astropreneur, Astropreneurs Hub, a firm focused on the growth of commercial space industry, which provides mentoring to new space startups, provides access to the International Space Station, and to conduct research, and also unique hands-on satellite workshops. Next, we have Mr. Rishabh Nakra, who has recently finished his master's degree in physics. He has been working towards communication in astronomy from 8th standard, and now he is the founder and admin at Secrets of the Universe, which is a popular space science website and Facebook page with an international team working with him today. Next, we have Dr. Srimati Kesan, who has moved from tourism and now to science, from science to tourism, and then tourism brought her to NASA, and then she embraced science in such an amazing way that today she's the founder and CEO of a leading science and technology incubator called Space Kids India. Space Kids India is working on the idea of borderless world and creating experiential learning in the field of space education, art, and culture. She is decorated with the ambassador status to NASA, the European Space Agency, and the Gagarin Research and Test Cosmonaut Training Center, Moscow. The last panelist we have is Mr. Shanmuga Subramaniam. He is a citizen scientist and techie working in Chennai. Yes, he can build websites and apps, but he has also got himself into finding satellites and meteorites up in the mysterious sky. He made us all very proud when he helped NASA locate debris from the Chandrayaan 2 lander's crash on the lunar surface. So the stories of all of them is very exciting, and I would invite all of our panelists to tell us 5 sentences about each of them so all of you get to know about them better. So I would invite Dr. Bidushi to start first. I welcome all of you aboard. And Dr. Bidushi, please tell us 5 interesting sentences about yourself. It could be anything about your career or even your favorite food or something about space.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I love opportunities like this to talk to people about space. I, like you, Sonal, when I was a kid, would look up at the sky and just wonder about what's out there. And when I finally realized that Mars was actually a place, that planets were places you could fly to, I was completely blown away. So when I was a kid, I had pictures of galaxies and stars posted all over my bedroom. And I've been hooked since I was a child and been very fortunate to be able to go into a career where I get paid to look at the sky and to look at space and space technology. So I feel so privileged that every day when I think about my work, I am excited. I've never been bored. And what's really cool is when I tell other people what I do for a living, they also get excited because I think space has something very inspirational and natural about it. So I'm just really excited to be here and be able to share that enthusiasm. So thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Bhattacharya. That's really interesting. Rishabh, what would you like to tell about yourself?
Thank you so much, Sonal. So I'm a science communicator and I have recently finished my master's in physics. According to me, some of the most significant highlights or achievements of my life are building a social media platform on astronomy that has over 1 million followers. And I recently worked with Dr. Abhas Mitra. He's a famous cosmologist, and I reviewed his book, The Rise and the Fall of the Black Hole Paradigm. And I also take pride in working at the Indian Institute of Astrophysics. I did an internship over there for 2 months. And besides science communication, I love swimming, having coffee, and binge watching web series.
Binge watching is a favorite of all of us, especially in the pandemic area. Thank you, Rishabh. Next, I would call Dr. Kason. Please tell us about your interesting journey.
I think I'm the odd man out without having any science background here. Completely from tourism and commerce background, I jumped into this very fantastic and fabulous industry called space. And, initially started off with space tourism and then went on to building satellites, the real satellites, I should say. And that too with children from the ages between 14 until 20. People thought I was crazy, but then it really happened when we built the baby steps. We took the first baby steps of building the balloon, the high altitude ballooning. We built about 12 of them, and then 2 suborbital satellites and 1 orbital satellite. So I think we are the only ones in the country who are doing this crazy job. So love to be here. Thank you so much for the invite. Extremely excited because I carry the moon in my name. I think probably that's why this industry has attracted me. Mati means moon in our vernacular Tamil. So that's why I'm here, I guess. Thank you, Sonal. Thank you so much for getting me onto this panel.
Thank you, Dr. Kason. And I think you are the testimonial of what we are actually trying to talk about in this discussion. So, Shanmuga, what would you like to tell about yourself?
Yeah, I told the participants. So I have been interested in space right from my childhood itself. So I have been watching rocket launches, and when my father told me stories about how Americans landed on moon with Apollo 11 and all those Apollo spacecraft, it got me more and more interested. So as a kid, I won't miss any rocket launch on our national television, that is Doordarshan. So that kept me interested more and more in space. And by the time I went into engineering, I choose mechanical specifically for this reason, because I can get to know more about space. But unfortunately, I got placed in an IT company. Even though I'm in a mechanical engineer position, I'm into IT and I work at a 9 to 5 day job. But the interest in me kept on egging me. So I was always following what is the latest updates on space, and what are the spacecraft that is being launched into different planets, and what is the exploration they are doing over there, like that. And at last, I think due to my interest in space, I got more interested in Chandrayaan 2. I was very eager that it would land on moon, but unfortunately it didn't. And as you all know that once I gave a tip off to NASA, so based on the tip off, they actually found the lander, which was kind of very exciting for me. I hope it would inspire a lot of others also in that field, I would say so. And thank you, Shruti and Sonal, for inviting me to the discussion, because I think it's a great place to share our thoughts and have some good discussion on this topic.
Thank you, Shanmuga, for your interesting introduction. And you remind me of a line from a Bollywood song. It's called Pocket Mein Rocket. So, it's like imagining you doing all the, coding for your things, and then you also have those, codes or whatever is involved in, looking at satellites and all. So that's really interesting. We'll talk more with each of you to get deeper into our topic for today, that how everyone can be a part of space science. So before that, let's take an idea of how our audience has been involved with space science so far. So we have a poll question for you. Shruti, can we have that with us on the
Yes,
screen?
launching it right away.
Okay.
We'll see a poll on our screens now. Would request everybody to please give their answers, and then we'll launch the results on everybody's screen too. So here goes.
It asks that, have you been a part of any of the following: a citizen science project about any science subject, a satellite building or any hands-on project related to space, an activity or a website, an active user of a website or a video channel about space science, or if you like reading books about space, or none of the above, but you're keen to know about them?
Okay, very quickly going to launch the results on everybody's screen now. You're able to see the results.
Okay, so most of our audience members are book readers, website and YouTube channel users. Some of them have been involved in a citizen science project, and some of them have been a part of a hands-on activity as well. But 34% of us have not been a part of these things, but they're keen to know about them. So I'm sure our panelists can introduce that. I would also ask our audience to quickly answer something for me, and you can type your answers in the question and answer section. That what is your favorite topic in space science? It could be anything, black holes, it could be dwarf stars, anything, but what is your favorite topic? And we'll just take 30 seconds for everyone to answer. Let's see. Okay. Shruti, would I see them in the open section? So it's creation.
Just give me 1 second.
Stars and creation, universe expansion. Let's see. I can see 2 answers by Vipul and Anusha. Thank you, Vipul and Anusha, for your answers. Do we have any more ideas coming up?
Yeah, Sonal, so why don't I just encapsulate everything that we're getting?
Sure.
Yeah. Maximum answers that we have are black holes and exoplanets. Something
Okay.
that we've received often is dark matter and dark energy.
Space bombs, somebody just
Yeah,
said.
a lot about stars and
Okay.
a bit about the Big Bang Theory, spaceships, interstellar missions, multiverse ideas,
Okay.
nebulas, and so on. So, do you think that gives us a fair idea of our
That's
audience?
a fair idea, and that's a very diverse answer. I'm happy that it's just not black holes, because after the picture that gained the most popularity, this is like a celebrity in the field of space science. So let's know how one can indulge in space science in different ways. Dr. Kasan, I would like to ask you that you are running this organization called Space Kids India. What are the different ways that people can indulge in the activities? Can you throw some light on that?
Initially, when you look at space sciences, there's not much, material in our textbooks, in our curriculum in the schools. So anything goes by personal interest of a child or interest of a parent. So there was a huge gap in that particular area. So that is where I started taking children from here to NASA, ESA, and the Russian Space Center, wherein children could have hands-on experience, of building water rocket. It may be small, but still, the way they handle the altimeter and everything gave them a big experience and exposure to do something big. And when they got to see the real-time Apollo and the other space missions, it was like exciting for the children. From mechanical and software engineering, they started deviating into space sciences. So that was a birthplace, I should say, for all these children. So space tourism was born in India, and a lot of children started coming along with us, and I had taken them there. But then that is just one part. You just cannot have the fantasy and just throw the child, and they not continue with that. So then we moved on into building real-time experiential learning by making these high altitude balloons. So we gave that real exposure to children, and these are high school students and college going students, who actually I handpicked them as a team, and we started working on this. So we started working on the electronics and we started working on the mechanics and coding. So there was a complete thing about space in that. And moving on from building the high altitude balloons, we went on to build real-time satellites. So we built a 1U satellite first, and then now, next month we have a launch. We are in the process of finishing the testing with a 3U satellite. So there is hands-on experience, because space is something that you cannot just go on reading in textbooks. You need to have that exposure in hands-on training. And of course, you need to learn about the simulations and the testing and so many things, because space is something which is very weird. People say it's crazy, and you have to really experience that. So experiential learning is one thing that we are doing. And apart from building in small curriculums for children, wherein, younger children, even right from drawing a space shuttle, they can even learn about water rockets, paper rockets, and, from there we start. So it's a, multiple thing that we are offering the children, and kind of giving them the experience.
Thank you, Dr. Kasan. So that means that people can get involved from, an earlier age, from, like you said, drawing to, building actual satellites that they can work on, and the hands-on part or the experience is what that matters really. And so anybody who's interested in that, do check out about Space Kids India, and there are other organizations in India who are doing similar activities. Now, this is about when somebody has a general curiosity. Dr. Bhattacharya, I would like to know from you that, apart from this general interest, what are the other reasons that people, children or adults, they need to, or they would want to, indulge in learning activities in the field of space science?
That's actually a very good question. And I would say there are two aspects you can look at. One is simply inspiration, and the other is practicality in terms of employment. So inspiration, we've already discussed looking at the stars. If any of us go and tell somebody what we do for a living, everybody says, wow, that's amazing. I've never heard anybody say, oh, that's kind of boring, right? I mean, it really, there's something in your soul that is excited by the stars. And what that does actually is when you are working on a space mission, you're very, very motivated, and you will push yourself and push innovation in a way that would take much longer here on Earth. So for example, if you are an engineer working on an electrical system, a lighting system, for example, and you have to build it for somebody's office, yeah, that's cool, you have a job, you'll do it. But if they tell you this lighting system is critical for astronauts who are launching next year, you're going to feel just a whole nother level of enthusiasm. And the teams work together in this way, and people become really focused. So space is really an important way to push innovation forward. And the other thing about space you really have to remember is we are talking about transferable skills. Just because you learn how to develop a circuit for outer space does not mean that you have to, only work in space. You can also go back and take that, the previous talk we saw biotechnology, and there's quite a bit of, interaction between the two. And so we're at this critical point right now with space, can I just say. The computer sector in the 1980s was just on the brink of having everybody have a phone in their hands, or technology. Computers cost tens of thousands, and they were the size of a room, right? They were huge and unaffordable. And then within just a very short period of time, we had computers in schools and in desks. So the space tech sector is now moving from this proof of technology way of working, as in, hey, I can launch it and it works, isn't that great, to a new area where space actually is becoming part of our everyday lives. And the best example of that is actually this, right? Your mobile phone talks to outer space hundreds, if not thousands of times a day. What does that mean in terms of practicality? We need people to come in and help us build an entire commercial industry now. Since we're no longer just proving tech, we're building things on scale to help people down here on planet Earth. We need people who work in the media, in law, in marketing, in social sciences, everybody to have some exposure to outer space so that you can come in and you can help us build out the sector. And the message I really want to give everybody today is we need you to take your interests and take your enthusiasm and think about how the sector is growing and where you might be able to help us out with skills that, you know, space nerds like me don't already have.
Thank you, Dr. Bhattacharya. These are reasons that, you know, we do not know explicitly, but they are important, especially like you said, training skills and all. So thank you for sharing these with us. Before moving on to further questions, I would give all the panelists a small task, and I would like all of you to answer in just one sentence about what was the favorite part in your journey of engaging people or your own self with the science around space. So I'll start backward alphabetically. Shanmuga, what was your favorite thing? In just one sentence.
My favorite moment was finding the debris of Chandrayaan-2 on lunar surface. I think
Okay.
that's my favorite moment, I would say always.
Thank you. Of course, that was really exciting. What about you, Dr. Kason?
Building the world's lightest and first ever 3D printed satellite.
Oh, that must be.
And that too with children.
Yeah, so double bonanza.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Rishabh?
Reaching 1 million followers was the best milestone because when I started it, it was from zero, and I never imagined I would reach this milestone. And besides that, throughout the journey, what I have enjoyed the most is connecting with new people, great young people, and motivating and teaching young students to pursue this field.
Okay, 1 million followers is a really good number. Dr. Bhattacharya, what about you? What was your favorite part?
Well, my favorite has been repeatedly being one of the first people on planet Earth in all of human history to be able to look at images from the surface of Mars from the Hubble Space Telescope. So it's been just such a privilege to be able to look at those, calibrate them, and then send them out to the rest of humanity.
Yeah, I just saw Dr. Kason doing a small clap.
Excited.
Yeah, that's really
lovely. I mean, that's a real moment.
Yeah, that's something, you know, you read in a space storybook and feel that this is something I want to see. So yeah, really nice peep into your journeys. Next, I would like to talk to Rishabh. Rishabh, you started your Facebook page very, very early in your life. From your 8th standard, you started small, and now it's a big successful project. So what learnings, you know, this journey gave you and you have for the receivers, the audience, and as well as also for the communicators who are, you know, trying to build such websites or Facebook or Instagram pages?
Thank you for the question, Sonal. So first of all, for the audience, I would like to say that no matter what, make sure you learn something new every day. Now, the source of that learning could be anything. It could be your favorite educational YouTube channel or your favorite Instagram page, your website, books, etc. When I was in 7th standard, I fell in love with astronomy when I came across a website from where I learned how to spot planets and locate some of the well-known stars in the night sky. Now, since astronomy wasn't taught in schools, I explored this subject independently, and it was the curiosity to learn something new that kept me going. I would also like to add that astronomy is a very vast subject. It is not only limited to certain, popular topics that you hear about, such as black holes, wormholes, time travel, etc. We had so many answers of black holes in the poll. And there are several other interesting topics to explore. In April last year, when there was a complete lockdown in several parts of the world, we started a 30 article series named Basics of Astrophysics. Now, we designed the series in such a way that we made sure we're not only writing about the famous stuff, but also about the basic concepts of astrophysics that are crucial to understand the advanced topics, but unfortunately are less frequently mentioned. Even on our Instagram page, we have an audience of about 300,000 followers, right? We balance our posts. In my 5 years of, in proper science communication, I have realized that you tend to interact more with the content that you're familiar with. I will give you an example. On 8th January, it was the birthday of the renowned physicist Stephen Hawking. So I uploaded a picture with the text, "Happy birthday, Stephen Hawking." The post got over 8,000 likes. About 2 weeks later, it was the birthday of another accomplished physicist, Lev Landau. Now, the birthday post of Lev Landau received only 2,400 likes. Why is that? Because compared to Stephen Hawking, Lev Landau is not well known. Less people know about Lev Landau than Stephen Hawking. And this is not only true for scientists, this is also true for science concepts. A post on, say, dark matter and dark energy will get more likes and more content interaction than a post on like much basic concepts such as the Hertzsprung-Russell diagram of astrophysics. So now if more and more people interact with the post, the better will be the platform's growth, right? This is the goal of every page or every platform like mine, to gain more and more followers. This is why you see so many posts on minimal topics of astronomy. But as a science communicator, I feel that this is my responsibility to not just focus on the growth of my platform by only concentrating on topics that are already famous and perform well, but to talk about every aspect of the subject, even if it is not popular among people. Because this is how the audience will get to the depth of the subject, explore the entire field, and learn new things they were unaware of. And to my fellow science communicators who have just started their platform, I would advise them to create quality and original content. Don't just follow what others are posting. Come up with something new, something innovative for your audience. That's how you will eventually grow your platform. And lastly, for the young enthusiasts who want to become an astrophysicist, I always say one thing, that make sure you have a strong hold on physics and mathematics, because astrophysics is nothing but physics applied to outer space. So if you master physics, astrophysics will be a cakewalk for you.
Thank you, Rishabh. I totally agree with your idea of balancing post, and I have personally experienced that while working with science television. That science communicators need those popular topics to hook the audience, but we need to talk about all the other topics, because in science everything is important,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, like you said, everybody should try to learn as much as they can from different sources that they have. Shanmuga, now tell us that you've been a part of a citizen science project. That's one another way to be part of the scientific community. So can you tell us how these work? What time and dedication one needs to give them, and what are these about?
Yeah, Sonal. So there are a lot of citizen science projects you can do in space, and you can contribute to the space exploration as well as the agencies like NASA and ISRO. So what I got involved is only a very small part of it, I would say, but there is a lot more. So if you see an organization like NASA, they have been always putting out different challenges like Space App Challenge as well as Food Challenge. So food challenge is something like where we can submit an idea for how the food should be there in space, and what is our astronaut should get a nutrient food, something like that. So there are a lot of challenges that has been put out by NASA. So what I would suggest to the audience is they can take part in any one of the challenges and submit an idea. And if the idea is very good enough and well received, then they can be selected to the next phase also. So there has been a lot of citizen science challenges that has been put by NASA. So that is one thing they can do. And another one is like tracking satellites as well as the other spacecraft that has been to Moon or Mars or like that. So even when in Chandrayaan 2, I was going through a lot of Twitter threads. So there was particular couple of guys who were tracking the Chandrayaan 2 lander right up to the lunar surface by using radio astronomy, so by using the radio frequencies of the lander. So that is some kind of an interesting area where a lot of people can help, because if you see that area, satellite tracking, it's very nascent and it's very new not a lot of people are in there, only maybe 3 or 4 people are over there. And even one of the amateur radio astronomers, his name is Scott Tilley, I think so. So he helped NASA to find an old satellite which has been lost out in the space. So with minimum of equipment, people can do a lot in that area. And the last one is I would come to the images that has been in public domain, be it the lunar images or be it the Mars images that has been captured by Mars orbiter camera. So there is a lot we can do with those images. So if you see, there has been a 10-year-old images of lunar surface captured by LROC camera. So that can be put to good use, and people can even submit their own papers on it. And there has been a lot of last spacecraft on lunar surface also. So if you see, the first spacecraft to reach the moon has not been found yet. And second thing is, there are landers like Chandrayaan-1 MIP, which hit lunar surface. The impact area has not been found by anyone. So there is nearly something like 10 to 15 satellites, or maybe the spacecrafts that's lying on the moon that's undetected from those images. Maybe people can join in and do a citizen science project on a large scale and find those things. So I would say this is something that can be taken even to the next level. And there is something called ZunoCam. So there is no one available at NASA to process those images. So people can even take a look at those, how to process those images and publish it to the NASA website itself. So these are the things I would say even a normal person can do with some amount of dedication as well as hard work, because this requires a lot of learning, I would say always. So these are the 3 things that I would say anyone can do, I would probably say.
Thank you, Shanmuga. Yes, I agree. That's really encouraging that, people can be a part of such projects. And, that's very satisfying when you're contributing towards science as well. Dr. Bhattacharya, I would like to know from you that how have people, the non-scientist people have been making a real impact in the field of science? Do you have some examples from your organization, maybe?
I have 2 examples. One is from my organization, and the other is sort of a bigger picture. The first one is in science and media communications. We have a young lady on our team who is very good at taking very technical information and disseminating it to the public. So basically, they're doing what you guys are doing here in the festival. And I think that's really important because, first of all, for the public, it is public money that's going into government space agencies. But then also in terms of where the sector is going to go in the future, we need to have people informed so that they can provide input. So a really interesting example in the larger picture is there are these materials called Mylar, M-Y-L-A-R, that are used, were originally used for thermal temperature mitigation on spacecraft that would be put on the outside of spacecraft to keep the temperature from fluctuating too much. That was done by scientists and engineers. But what's really important here is other people in the field of social services and medicine realized this material could be used here on planet Earth to benefit people on a very large scale. So you could go now on Amazon and just purchase one of these Mylar sheets for just a few $100, and you can buy it and use it to keep yourself warm. And if you've ever had access to one of these, they're amazing. They just are so good at trapping in heat. So organizations such as the Red Cross use those and distribute them by the thousands to refugees in critical situations to keep them warm. They're inexpensive and they're very durable. And so it's a fantastic example of how space technology was taken by somebody who's not a space person and applied to the benefit of humanity. So whenever you look at spacecraft, whenever you think about space tech, I would encourage you to take your own interests and figure out how what's in space can be brought back down here to Earth to help all of us.
Thank you. I really like how your examples are, and whatever you've spoken so far is out of the most popular stuff. Like people think about impact, about finding planets and everything, which is important, of course. But bringing something to use back on Earth is, and like considering science communication important, that's really, as a science communicator, I'm really happy to hear that.
Me
Thank
too.
you so much. I have a fun task for all of you panelists. I would like each of you to think of one food item that comes into your mind that you can relate with space. And we'll go, I'll just say randomly all of your names and just tell me one food item that you can relate to space. Dr. Kason.
Fig.
Sorry?
Fig. Fig.
Fig. Why fig?
Because you can earth is flat. That's what our ancestors and everybody said, earth is flat. So the the fruit is flat, and then you've got a lot of seeds in it, and these seeds, you can say, they denote the planets. So many planets in our galaxy, and the amount of fruits in one tree denotes to the million galaxies that you have. So I would say it's a fruit, a fig fruit.
Okay, so you're kind of connecting the history of how people saw space to now. And what about you, Rishabh?
Spaghetti.
Spaghetti. Why so?
Because there is a term called spaghettification, and it's when a body falls into a black hole and it is ripped apart by the gravitational pull like a spaghetti. So that process is known as spaghettification. So whenever I have it, I think of black holes.
Okay, that's interesting. Shanmuga, what about you?
I think I'm only thinking about my favorite food item, but being out there in space, I think it's very tough to have those food items.
What is that?
My favorite is, as a Tamil, I would say my favorite is dosa. So what if we go into space, and what if you want to have your favorite food item, what you would be doing? So that's where my line of thought is actually.
I would personally love to have a nice plate of dosa sitting somewhere in the space, or maybe flying, but just worried about my sambar going all over.
Yeah, that's going to be the next challenge, because
Okay.
soon we are going to go to moon as well as Mars. So that is going to be huge challenges about what is the food items they are going to go have over there. I think there is a great deal of innovation in that front, I would say.
But definitely it would be so nice. It's such a warm South Indian cuisine is such a warm food. What about you, Dr. Bhattacharya? What comes into
Well, I'm inspired. I think we should all start voting for dosa in space. That's a great idea. But because they've already had tacos, a Mexican food, so why not dosa? But my favorite, I would have to say, is not a food, but a drink, milk. Because when I was younger, I watched astronauts on the International Space Station take milk from a container, pour it out, and it made a blob, and then they would open their mouth and drink it. And it was just so cool, yet so ridiculous to watch them drinking milk blobs that were floating around inside of the space station. So in fact, every time I have milk and I'm pouring it, I'm thinking, wow, if I were in space, this would be going all over the place and not directly into my glass. So milk.
That's really nice. And now we have a whole dinner table ready with milk, figs, spaghetti, and dosa. So let's bring our audience back from the idea of food. And I have a question for all of you. It would be in your poll again. Shruti, can we please have the second poll question? So what do you all think is the biggest challenge in accessing space science? Is it the language that is used? It's difficult, lots of jargon, big words. Is it the style that is used is boring for you? Is it the means to access? Sometimes you have to pay a lot of fee for it. Or is it like too much of information that you have to search through? Or are there other reasons? Just wait for a few seconds for everyone to answer. We have the result. The maximum votes are that the means to access are costly. The second highest vote goes to there's too much information. Then we have the language is difficult, and then we have that the style used is boring. So I think the communicators have been stylish enough because that gets the lowest votes, and 14%, that is 16 people present here, say there are other reasons. So that's a really nice insight for the communicators, policymakers, industries watching this session, that the points that we can work on in making space science or other science subjects accessible to our audience. I'll go next to Dr. Kasan. Dr. Kasan, quickly, if you can tell us that what challenges have you faced in making space science accessible to students or adults in informal learning settings?
Well, I think it's been a lot difficult. I think this poll is very interesting, Sonal, because the accessibility is one huge question. People living in the United States, NASA, they've got so many places where you have people going and visiting there and having hands-on experience there. And a 7-year-old child can actually play and learn in a very fun manner. That is lacking in India. It's very difficult. You have this organization ISRO here, which is very huge, and you've got brilliant scientists there and everything there. But only thing is, it is for students who are beyond graduation. For a student like a 7-year-old, it is very, very difficult for us to take them to ISRO to teach them what is space science, because any child, you need to teach them in a fun manner. So you start with paper rockets. I'm sorry to keep repeating this, but this is how you start. You start with color pencils, then you move on to papers, then you move on to making water rockets and satellites and stuff like that. But what happens in the actual scale? The actual scale, we are unable to teach them. We do not have any simulators to teach them. So what happens is, this is becoming a real challenge for us. So we are kind of collaborating with a lot of other space agencies across the globe and trying to bring this and making it into bits and pieces where the language is also easily understandable, and there are games, and in a fun manner we could teach space. We can break it down into small bits so that even a 7-year and an 8-year-old space enthusiast is not sleeping crying that she or he doesn't understand what is space, and he or she is not included in that. So that is where and also I have authored a small book, 3 kids, the first kids to the moon. So stories are another way to enthuse children into space. So these are the kinds or means and ways in which we are able to bring down space to the little child possible here in India. And we have collaborated with the other space agencies so that we could bring in these small components and small sensors and all these things, and we are trying to showcase that to children. So these are the things that I think we have to develop here in India. And in fact, I'm trying to speak to a lot of chief ministers across the country to start this one research park, space research park, wherein you kind of have different space shuttles. What is whatever the Americans have used, whatever the Russians have used, children need to see something to understand. Touch, feel, they need to have the touch, feel to understand all this. So this is what we're trying to work on, and hopefully we'll be successful soon.
Thank you, Dr. K. Yeah, the things you talk about, throw light on, how challenging and it is, and how much hard work people like you, our other panelists are bringing in. So I think people from all the industries, as much I would say, they can help build these environments, to build like we have in our constitution, a scientific temper into people. That will be really nice if everybody comes together. But yeah, a lot of hard work goes in this.
Absolutely. See, if you have to say, you need a gigamolar counter in a satellite, You don't even know what is a gigamolar counter, and it is all like, ooh, gigamolar counter. It's fun. So what is a gigamolar counter? You have to bring that, it's argon gas. You need to know what is it. So, you have to break it down into pieces, for which you need some material facts here. And that is where we are lacking. So I think we will try hard, and very soon we'll get all these things in India.
But we are moving ahead in the road with all the efforts that people like
Absolutely.
you all and everybody is doing. We need communication, we need the logistics, we need the materials, we need people themselves to bring be an enthusiast about such topics. So thank you for sharing the challenges that you faced. Another challenge we see is a lot of fake news, pseudoscience. We've seen that in the pandemic happening a lot, but there's a lot happening in space science as well. Rishabh, you've been involved in social media, right? Facebook pages and Facebook or WhatsApp or all other social media platforms. They are a big place where the pseudoscience or fake news gets accelerated like a snowball. So how can we address them? How can we do away with them?
Yes, Sonal. So fake news and misinformation find their way quickly on social media. Every day I come across a couple of posts that are factually wrong and have been created to get, more content interaction. And, to mock the situation, one day I made a meme in which Albert Einstein is quoted saying, "I never said half the things people say I did." And then below that there is another quote saying that I never said the above lines too. so
That's
now
a
the
nice
question
way.
so
Yeah.
now the question is how to fight it. One of the way is to go into the details. I'll share one instance with you. In September 2019, a news article spread like a wildfire on the internet, as used by several news outlets and many social media pages. The headline was, "Gamma ray bursts form jets that travel faster than light." And I'm not only talking about the small platforms, even the most established ones use a similar headline for their article snippets. Now, when I read the headline, when I came across it, I was surprised because such a claim would change the course of physics and pose a significant challenge to Einstein's special theory of relativity. But when I read the article, the complete article, I was disappointed because there was nothing special in it. Now, it said that the jets could travel faster than the local speed of light. Now, that is in the gas clouds where the speed of light is less than what it is in a vacuum. Hence, there was no violation of the special theory of relativity. Now, see, there would have been several people who could not or did not read the full article, okay, but they only read the headline. They would have discussed it with their friends. Oh, see, scientists found something traveling faster than light. And a fraction of them would have inferred that the special theory of relativity has been violated, and so on. Now, this is an example where an incomplete piece of headline gave birth to a piece of false news. Because I received several messages on my page to explain this so-called anomaly. So going into the details is crucial. Every weekend, I upload a post on Facebook called "This Week in Space," and this is one of the, this is the oldest post of my page, and it dates back, to 5 years. 5 years ago, I started this series on my page. So I upload this post, "This Week in Space," in which I highlight the week's development in space science and technology. Now, I make sure that I provide external links to all the highlights in the caption of the post. It is either a press release or the concerned highlights research paper. So this is one way we can fight, fake news and pseudoscience by, going into the details as a reader and as a science communicator by providing authentic links for reference.
Okay, thank you, Rishabh. These are really good examples, and I really like your idea of the meme. I agree. I think all the viewers who are a part of this panel today, something I learned while I was getting my academic training as a science communicator is to have a critical thinking. it's okay. You can read any headline, you can read any article, just try to think it critically, try to question it. And that's what science is about, questioning everything that you see, right? And the Chinese whispers is something we play as children. It's something that teaches us how, fake news just comes. You hear something, and by the end of it, like Rishabh, you said, that just missing few words before speed of light changes the meaning totally. So
So
yeah.
see, because I will share another example that,
Sure.
if you are a science communicator and you are the source of, telling the audience that this is what is happening in the research field. Now, suppose I make a video that on, primordial black holes. Now, I'm not a researcher in primordial black holes, so I cannot, verify the claims experimentally. But as a science communicator, what I do is I firstly I do explain in my videos that it is a claim that still needs verification, and secondly I direct my audience to the research paper or the press release for further information. So I never write that this is the case, this has been the case. I just say that according to a recent research, and that these claims are they still need to be verified experimentally. I don't say that now this is the theory.
I think we've lost Sonal
Yeah.
in the submission. Just like the black holes are depicted like a donut. You saw a WhatsApp message going around everywhere. So my kids came running to me and they said, "Ma'am, is it a vanilla donut or is it a chocolate donut? How is it going to be looking?" Oh yes, Sonal is back.
Yeah, sorry. Things that technology does to us. I wandered somewhere in space, getting so excited by the this thing. We'll move on to the questions, because my last question to our panel expert Shanmuga is same as something somebody wants to ask him. I'm sorry, I left. Had Rishabh completed his
Yeah, I
answer?
completed my
I'm
answer.
sorry, I just assumed because Dr. Kasen was kind of rounding it up. So thanks again, Rishabh, for
Thank
telling
you.
us about how to do away with the fake news. Shanmuga, I am very interested, and somebody from our audience, the name is not specified, says that I find it really intriguing how Mr. Subramaniam sir was able to contribute in space science even though he is from IT background. Can you talk more about how it was possible for him to do so? Shanmuga, can you tell the steps of, how you ended up finding the debris of the lander and how people can, find satellites in the space?
Okay, to begin with, as we all know, ISRO lost the contact with lander. So NASA LRO has been orbiting around the moon for the last 10 years. So they have been capturing images of each and every area of the moon. And so when you look at the database or the map they have, we can look back even 10 years back, what was the area was like. So they have been searching for the particular area where the crash happened or lander was supposed to be there, but they were not able to find it because in Moon South Pole the lighting conditions are so different. So to begin with, I didn't even know all these details when I started off looking for the Vikram lander, but I proceed further. I was able to gather a lot of details about what is the lighting conditions at South Pole, how South Pole is different from other areas on the moon surface, like that. So when NASA was not able to find it, they put it out in a public website saying these are the images, you can download it. So this is like a 1 million pixel image. So if you are able to find it, then just let us know, like that they said. So I started searching the image without any plan, like whether I can do it by using AI or do it by using the manual methods, like that. Then I choose the manual methods, like just finding in a normal image whether there is any impact area or whether there is any shiny surface, shiny thing on the moon, like that. But I was not able to find it for the first couple of days. So then I started only searching in a particular, let us say 2 into 2 pixel area, that is 2 into 2 square kilometer area. So I only searched in that area because I pretty much very well know that the lander came from the North Pole and it was not from the South Pole. So it came from the North Pole to land on the South Pole. So I searched only in that direction. So after some hours of searching, I was able to find something different. So then I went back and looked in the old images. I was not able to find anything. So whatever I found might be just a tiny payload on the lander itself. So even after finding that, persistence is must, because first when I put out it, nobody cared about it. Then I reached out to a couple of NASA scientists also. I think they didn't even look at the email. Then what I did means I reached out to one of the uh, principal investigator of the LROC camera. So then he thought this might be the one, and then he reached out to the NASA scientists, because NASA and LRC are in close collaboration. Then they put out an press release saying they've actually found it based on my takeoff. So even if you do all the hard work, persistence is a must, because without persistence, you won't be able to achieve anything in space. You should try again and again until you succeed over there, I would say. So that's a very quick recap of whatever I did, I would say. And if anybody is interested, they can still go and do a lot of stuff like this on lunar surface. As I said earlier, there has been nearly 20 plus spacecraft that has been lost out on the lunar surface. So you've got a lot of images on LROC Quick Map. So you can go in and search for the location and see whether there's something different. Either you can put out a paper or reach out to some of the scientists saying, this is what I found, something like that. So it's a very interesting subject, very interesting for anyone who is interested in citizen science, I would say.
Thank you, Shanmuga, for sharing your story. It encourages people. Everyone can do it, but it needs the perseverance, as you said, interest and the perseverance too. You need a lot of patience. There are lots of images, coding, and so much to get involved in. Thank you so much. We have another question to Dr. Bhattacharya. It is from Karthikeyan. They say that, can you please throw some light on Perseverance rover and James Webb Space Telescope? Thank you.
Okay, that's a great question. As you might know, the Mars Perseverance rover is arriving at Mars on the 19th of February, I think it is. 18th. So the orbiter is going to be there. And so then the lander is actually going to leave the spacecraft and land on the Earth. And the reason, or sorry, on Mars. See, I think of both planets as being kind of the same in my head. Once it lands on Mars, this particular rover and its lander have a series of amazing experiments on them. First of all, there's a helicopter on board that will try to demonstrate flight on the surface of Mars, where there's a very tenuous, very thin atmosphere. They're also going to try and make oxygen from material on Mars itself. And the idea here being that they will try to look at, possible human colonization, and would it be possible to manufacture oxygen locally? And there are also there are a number of other experiments on this rover that are preparing the way for human beings to land on the surface of Mars itself. And here we're talking not just about going there, but because it's cool, but in the longer term, people like Elon Musk have a vision of us getting out to Mars and becoming a multi-world species. So we are all paving the way for this. And right now it's a very expensive endeavor, but I think over time it will become less and less expensive, just like satellites have now dropped to the point where Dr. Keson's students can actually go and build and launch them, whereas before they would have cost hundreds of millions of US dollars, right? So we're moving in that direction also with Mars technology. Now, the James Webb Space Telescope is the follow-up to the first job I ever had in college, or the Hubble Space Telescope. With the James Webb Space Telescope, we should be able to look much further out into the universe and really look to the beginnings of the formation of the universe, tens of billions of years back. So there are a fleet of instruments on there at different wavelengths that will give you information on, how was the universe formed, talking about nebula, star formation regions and other aspects of it too. And here, let me just give a plug here for, as a mother, talking about families. I have two daughters, and one of the things that I think has been really important for them is getting exposure to space. So, space, going to parks, NASA or any other space science museums is fantastic. And what you can do there is think of this as a real family outing. And I really do hope ISRO comes up with a series of visitor centers across the country, because I imagine that I, as a parent with young children, would make a trip to this location and I would be inspired as a parent and my kids would also be inspired. So this is really the best way to build the space workforce. You want to talk about hands-on and tangible. I just want to make a plug for asking ISRO to please go ahead and build these visitor centers across the nation so that we can have people, entire families going to visit these and continue to build the workforce that India so critically needs to be able to stay as a leader in the space sector in the coming decades.
In fact, Ms. Vidushi, I had requested Honorable Prime Minister when we had an interaction 3 weeks ago. I made this presentation and I told him this is the very must required for India. You know, every
Excellent.
child needs that, that visit. So I'm so glad that you also second that. Thank you so much.
Yep. Yep.
Great. Some good ideas that I hope reaches the deciding body, policymakers, and everybody who was involved in building these centers. That will be really, really nice. Thank you, Karthikeyan, for such an interesting question. Next question we have for Dr. Kesan. The question says that we are sending so many satellites every year. So in 2050, there will be more satellites. What are the disadvantages or effect on our planet? Some great scientists told that what we send to space will come back to us. What is your thought on this? I think they touch upon space debris.
Space debris, yeah, I know. Because that's a fantasy word or a jargon, I should say. Immediately when you say you're sending up a satellite, you're creating a debris. Of course, yes, but if we do not send one, then we are lagging behind. We are not going to be, innovating anything, or we are not going to be learning anything. So we definitely, of course, SpaceX is sending Starlinks and, so many, recently 143 satellites. So India, I think, is not still onto that extent, but at least we definitely need to send about 20 to 25 satellites a year, because we need our, we are still working on our weather imaging and everything. So for which we definitely have to send satellites. So please don't say no to it, and please don't say it's causing debris, because most of it is sent in the lower Earth orbit, and it becomes it burns out, and so it's not going to cause any harm. So the huge satellites are sent in the GEO platform, and not many go up to the GEO platform though.
Thank you, Dr. Kesan, and thank you for the question. It's really interesting, about all these things going up in the space, but there are measures coming up, to decrease that debris in space. So, we are not polluting it. And like you said, there are many important reasons why we need all those satellites up there. So we are running up with time, and I'll just take one last question. It is to Rishabh. Rishabh, where do you see the scope of astrophysics and aeronautical engineering in the next 10 years?
So in this country, I think aeronautics and astrophysics, they are very different branches, but they have a great scope, because see, more and more people are now beginning to realize that because of ISRO's great participation in, now ISRO is becoming very active as compared to the previous decade in sending satellites in space. Now more and more people are seeing the potential of the Indian space program, and more people are going into the aeronautical engineering. Now, as far as astrophysics is concerned, since more and more satellites are sending back data, we need more people to analyze that data and go in the field of astrophysics, because see, data analysis has become so important for astrophysicists that we are running short of manpower to analyze so much of data that is being produced. There is a next biggest radio telescope, the Square Kilometer Array. Now, it is expected that it will produce every single night. It will produce so much data that hasn't been produced by several radio telescopes combined, the square kilometer array. So, in order to manipulate that data and analyze that data, we need more astrophysicists and more people who are into this field. So, the scope of astrophysics is surely going to increase as we launch more and more telescopes and more satellites that probe deeper into the universe.
Thank you, Rishabh, for answering this question, which was from Mayank. Thank you, Mayank, for the question. I think we are done for today. It was a very interesting discussion. Thank you, all the panelists, for sharing your stories, your journey, the challenges, the success, all of which, make the process of science. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone who joined us. You gave us your precious time on a Friday evening. So that means a lot to all of us. Thank you so much. And